So three, two, and one. All right, guys, this is Normal Central coming back at you on the YouTube video, and I really appreciate all the love and support so far. Before the video even starts, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're going to do a lot of content as we go through. I'm up to about 2,300 subscribers so far. So I haven't seen many likes on the video, so be sure to like this video because guess what? I got my guy No Nation with me today again. No Nation, man, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. And as always, I'm going to put your stuff in the description so that way everybody can be able to go find you. Because guess what, man? It is Wednesday afternoon, August 26th, and we are a couple of days away from Florida State kicking off against New Mexico State on the great CW network at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. It's going to be a fantastic environment in Doak Campbell Stadium to finally get Florida State football back. So we're going to have a lot of discussions today. I'm going to make this a little bit longer of a video, so we're going to knock it out. I hope every one of you enjoy, and plus we are going to be doing a game preview tomorrow. I'm going to kind of be releasing that also. It's going to be a longer style video also. I'll get that out. No video on Friday, but I might have a small one coming out. But we're going to get a lot of content out as we go throughout the week, and I hope everybody enjoys. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start off with Florida State having a lot of question marks. This whole team has like got a lot of different varieties that they have. A lot of fans are kind of skeptical on what this team can be. What are your three biggest questions going into this New Mexico State game about this team so far?
Well, starting out, I'm going to go to a room that's probably has the most question marks, in my
Hmm.
opinion, just after recent years, and
Yeah.
that is the linebacker room. I
Hmm.
mean, the one guy that you know for sure is out there is the heat-seeking missile, Chris Jones.
Hmm.
You may have a Caleb LaValle.
Yeah.
You may have a Gaber. I think
Yeah.
that's how you say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have Omar Graham.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting to start. And then you
Yeah.
have a Blake Nicholson, but you also have a guy like AJ Cottrell as well.
And Isaiah
So,
Williams.
and Isaiah Williams. I was, but who do you pair next to Chris Jones? We talked about that in a previous
Mhm.
video. I mean, we've heard a lot about Caleb LaValle.
Yeah.
That would probably be my next pick. But where do you go at that third spot? If you're running three linebackers, do you go with freshman Isaiah Williams? Do you see a Gaber step in? Do you have a guy like Nicholson, who's a guy that we've both alluded to as a guy that needs to, quite frankly, step up
Yeah.
because his production hasn't been there? So, I mean, where do you go with that?
Yeah, I agree. I think Caleb Valley is probably going to be your number two, just because I think, Ernie Sims has talked about him as being an alpha. You don't say that quite often, but the problem is he had that foot injury. He only played basically a game on special teams, was kind of getting back into the swing of things, and never really did much. Your whole film, as we talk about with Ashton Daniels, who I'm going to address in just a second, you're basing off a one game sample size of a bowl game against Connecticut. I mean, you're basing it off of two, just preseason camp. It's easy to do stuff in preseason camp, but when you get to the game and those bright lights are on in Doak Campbell Stadium, what are you doing with this team? And the biggest thing is the linebackers were a big factor in Florida State's season last year. There were some bright moments, here and there. I'm not saying it was the worst linebacking core they've had because Florida State's had some bad linebackers, but I think that it's a big reason why Jaden Baugh had 225 pass or rushing yards. I mean, it's a big reason why they weren't able to stop the run at times. And if Alabama had even a pulse rushing the ball, I just think that this would have been a different result. And I think that, being able to stop the run is going to be so big for this team because you don't have a Daryl Jackson up the middle. You don't have some of these physical guys that you want. You're hoping that Jordan Sanders and Kevin Wynn and other guys like that, even a Daniel Lyons, can be a run stopper. But it's so hard to think because they're not, 6'5", 337 pounds. But I'll go with mine as being Ashton Daniels at quarterback. It's kind of an obvious answer. It's a thing that a lot of fan base is talking about so far. He come from Auburn, was previous at Stanford before that. Like his shining moments were like the 29-point comeback against Colorado at Stanford. He had those two-game sample size at Auburn with Vandy and Alabama. And there were some bright moments. But the problem is like, yeah, you weren't able to start over Jackson Arnold. And then you had over 800 total yards, you had five touchdowns, you had productivity. But it's like you're basing this off of a two-game sample size. And at Florida State, a proud program that's built by Bobby Bowden and had a championship by Jimbo Fisher and even had success with Mike Norvell in 22 and 23, you want to see more from this program. You don't want to take chances. Miami's not taking a chance with a quarterback. They're taking Darian Mensah, who has been productivity there. There's been a Carson Beck who's been very good in his career. Derek King, another one. There's Cam Ward. I mean, the list goes on. Those transfer quarterbacks have been good, but Florida State's taking a chance on DJ Uiagalelei, and then Thomas Castellanos, and now Ashton Daniels. It's like those three, and you're like, okay, what have they really done in their college careers? And I'm not saying Ashton Daniels is a terrible quarterback by any means, but he's got a lot to prove.
Absolutely, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Also, you just found out the news today that Thomas Castellanos is now a Red Raider.
Yeah, it's crazy. We'll see if the eligibility goes through, and we'll see what position he plays. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you gotta hope Ashton Daniels, them obviously naming him a starter that
Mhm.
early on. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously they feel some sort of way about
Hmm.
him. I hope he can live up to the hype that they're giving him.
I agree. Who's your next one?
I was going to talk about the defensive line because
Okay.
that's another big question mark going
Yeah.
in, and that's got a lot of impact on how the season's going to go.
Hmm.
Because I want to Mandrell Desir, he was talking with the media
Hmm.
yesterday, and this is getting into one of your points that you're going to be
Hmm.
talking about.
Yeah.
But he was saying that the offensive line and the defensive line, I mean, they go head to head and they are, challenging each other. And
Yeah.
that speaks a lot on Mandrill, to go out there and say that the offensive line, that's another big question mark,
Yeah.
is really competing with the defense. Um, he also mentioned that some of the freshmen that we got, like Franklin Whitley,
Hmm.
Whitley
Yeah.
Cadu,
Uh-huh.
his brother Daryl Desir. I
Yeah.
mean, those are guys that he thinks that are ready to, take it up a notch in this year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, man. Like they got 8 freshmen in this recruiting class, and even a guy like Jalen Anderson, who's kind of playing that, jack position there. I think is going to be a pretty good guy for Florida State and what they bring to the table because they really haven't had a jack. Obviously Rylan Kennedy is going to be a big factor there too, and that's a big factor with everything that's going to go through with Florida State. But as I talked about before, the trenches, like the offensive line room, the defensive line room, the offensive line room is going to be a big factor because guess what? Florida State has got to make sure they don't have a regression. And 2025 was something with Micah Pettis, Luke Pettimone, I think was another guy that they really liked. But it's like, okay, we have both of those guys that are very productive. And even this year, you have a Nate Paps who you really like. Then you have an Xavier Chaplin who you also really like. And it's like, okay, you have both of those guys, but then you have an Andre Otto and a Paul Bowling that's battling each other. You have a Braden Joyner who's struggled at center. He's allowed a lot of pressures. And, Wee Woo, who's had a lot of pressures too. And he's coming from, Stephen F. Austin. It's not like a picture perfect situation for the offensive line. And it's not something we've really noticed. They played really well last year. Will Florida State be able to do it? And I really do have a lot of confidence in Herb Hand. He's done a lot of experience. He's had a lot of things go his way, but it's like you got to see it again. And it's such a dangerous proposition, as we know with the quarterback position, to keep going back to the transfer portal over and over and over again until it's too late.
Absolutely. You know how I feel about the recruits.
Yeah.
You have a Jaden Todd, you have a
Yeah. Yeah.
Jonathan Daniels, and you
Yeah.
have an Andre Otto.
Yep.
And it seems like if you're going to go out and I mean, you can't just keep going to the portal
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
an offensive line. You need to get some homegrown recruits um, that are not just these 1 2 year rentals.
Yeah.
You want a guy that's going to be there the next 3 to 4 years. And I feel like we need to really emphasize development in that on the offensive line.
1000%. I'll go with my third point, and then I'll let you go with yours. I got year two of Tony White's 3-3-5 system. And I think that's a big thing because Florida State fans are, I'm not going to say complaining about the 3-3-5, but they're like, man, we're Florida State. We don't really need to do a 3-3-5. And you saw flashes of like the Alabama game that it was really productive. You saw, the Virginia Tech game and the Wake Forest game and stuff like that. But it's like, okay, what else have you really done? And it's kind of concerning a little bit. It really is. And like it concerns me a lot because Tony White in a lot of his press conferences are like, okay, we didn't have a whole lot of success. We had a lot of guys that were maybe in the wrong position, maybe out of a step, maybe a couple of steps out of step. And I love, Ashton Barker at the Rover position. I think it could really be a good factor for what Florida State brings to the table on defense because he brings that intensity. 42 tackles last year, 3.5 sacks. And you have guys like, Jabril Rawls. and then also Quindarius Jones, Nehemiah Chandler. You have pieces there. KJ Kirkland on the safety side of things. You have some pieces that you can grow on, but it's like, okay, when are we going to see this come to fruition? And when are we going to have a consistency on that defensive side and not being able to allow like a third game of the year, a fourth game of the year, Virginia, scoring over, 38 points on you and, just being able to basically score at will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about one of the bright spots on all that 3-3-5
Mm.
defense, Earl Little Jr. He's
Yeah.
now at Ohio State.
Yep.
So, in terms of that rover position, I like Ashlon Barker. I mean, I
Yeah.
think he's very similar to Earl Little Jr. He's probably
Yeah.
not going to be as hard hitting,
Yeah.
but he's gonna be
I
kind of
agree.
a good replacement for him.
Yeah. 1000%. So what you got for the third point?
I'm gonna talk about the tight ends
Okay.
because I think you were talking about it. I think you said this is an area that's kind of uh, went down a little bit,
Mm.
with the
Yeah.
recent stuff. I like Landon Thomas. I'm a very big Landon Thomas believer, and I
Yeah.
think with Mike Norvell calling the plays,
Hmm.
we both know we're gonna see a lot more tight ends
I agree.
this season.
Yeah.
Whether it be Riles, whether it be Lofton, whether it be
Hmm.
and Landon Thomas. You
Yeah.
may even see a Tay Gelsey kind of fill that role too. Um,
1000%.
but you want to see more production from the tight end room. I know you have your Devin Carter, you have your
Who's hurt
Jason
now?
Lopez.
But yeah.
Yeah, he is. You have your Jason Lopez, you have your Deuce Robinson, you have your Dancy, but where are you going to go if those guys are covered? I
Yeah.
mean, just do a little chuck down,
Yeah.
something.
I agree, man. It's like the tight end position, as Mike Norvell talked about. He finally gave some praise to Landon Thomas in a while, saying he played his best football that he has in his entire career. That's huge for him. And I'm not saying been a great player at Florida State, but if he's improving and playing some of his best football, that is great to hear for a Florida State offense that wants to be able to have something there. And Desiree Riles is another guy who they really like. Chase Lofton, maybe a guy that can step up and emerge a little bit later. So we'll definitely see. I think Florida State can have a lot of things there and go from there. But let's go ahead and go over to basically some players that you're watching for in the New Mexico State game. Because Florida State's favored by over 30 points. They're at 31.5 right now, according to DraftKings Sportsbook. And, with the thing about it is New Mexico State is, coming off of a season that they're not really doing a great thing so far. They have a couple of new pieces. One of their safeties had a ruptured liver, I believe. Prayers go out to him. I know that's a tough injury. That's a tough thing to go through for a kid, and you definitely don't want to see him out for the rest of the year or anything with stuff like that. I mean, that stuff stings. You never want to see a player like that go down, especially a guy that's got over 50 tackles last year. But I want to kind of address what I think is going to be some players you need to watch for in the stands if you're in Doak Campbell Stadium or if you're watching on the CW network, what kind of some of these players are going to be. And I'll kind of list my three players. I want to get your thoughts and I want you to kind of describe yours. But Malachi Marshall, he's going to be coming in at some point during the game. He might be quarterback number two. He's got a couple pounds on him now at this point. He's really improved as a passer. He's kind of getting involved with the offense, and you probably think he's going to be the backup, against Ashton Daniels. He's, a JUCO national champion. He's a guy that Florida State really liked in this recruiting cycle. And the thing about it is Kevin Sperry's been very inconsistent. You haven't heard much of his name. This is a guy how you want to see how he does in the bright lights. Next one is Usman Chroma, and I get it. Usman Chroma is probably going to be your starter at running back. That doesn't mean everything for this Mike Norvell offense. We know it. We've seen it. Look at the games against like even Ireland against Georgia Tech. Gosh, I hate to keep looking back at that game. That was really tough to watch. But you saw, running backs that were like Roydell Williams that would get 4 carries in the first drive and then just disappear. I don't want to see, Chroma get 6 or 7 carries in the first, couple of drives, and the next thing you know, we might see him one or two times. Or as we call it, the Keziah Holmes effect, where he has a 15-yard rush and you don't see him the rest of the game. You want to see him be successful. And I get it. Sam Singleton is a tremendous running back. He's very fast. And then you also have a guy like Trey Wisner. But you have to play Chroma. You spent a lot of money on him to get him away from Georgia and as well as Auburn in the transfer portal, or not in the transfer, but in the recruiting portal. There's a thing where you have to be able to play your high four stars. You cannot keep going back to the well in the portal. and getting your Wisner. I thought the Wisner decision to bring him back or bring him in was not the greatest, but you take the talent at which you can get. But it seems like Chroma is going to be your guy. Will he be that guy? And then lastly, I think Caleb Valley. You got your second linebacker you addressed a little bit earlier. You have your Chris Jones who had 135 tackles last year at Southern Miss. You have a Caleb Valley who's only had 9 tackles. He's got all these expectations and everything's going through. Not to say that New Mexico State could run it down your throat, but they have a running back last year, a transfer that they brought in that has an over 900 yards. He had 9 touchdowns. So this is a guy that's been very productive, at his last stop. So you want to see more production from him because if you're not able to stop the run early and often, not to say this game can get wonky, but you could kind of look up and be like, man, New Mexico State's got 120 rushing yards. Like, really? I mean, not to say the score would be that much different. I think Florida State should be able to score and be able to play defense. But if you're able to not stop them between the 20s and rushing, what are you going to do against SMU next week? So I think that's a big factor. You got to see some of these linebackers being aggressive and run support, stop the run, being able to make them one-dimensional for a guy that throws 13 interceptions and also has 6 fumbles. You want to see that guy being able to be on the field and throw the football in passing situations.
Absolutely. I love all your picks. I think they're all really, really good. And you mentioned something with Usman, with
Mhm.
Chroma,
Yeah.
about the high 4 stars. We were just talking
Mhm.
about this. Landon
Yeah.
Thomas,
Hmm.
another high 4 star,
Yep.
that they also flipped, I believe, from Georgia, or
Yep.
he was heavily
Yeah. Yeah.
considering Georgia.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You want to see how he plays too, you know. But I like all your picks. I think I really like Malachi Marshall.
Yeah.
That's a guy I'm very, very high on.
Yeah.
And Love Valley's probably, like you said, he's probably going to be your second linebacker on the
Yeah.
field.
I feel that. Who you got? Who's your picks?
I'm going Ashton Daniels. That
Okay.
was one of the things that you were talking about as well, is how is he going to perform? You
Yeah.
haven't seen a whole lot from him in his career.
Hmm.
You kind of have those little sample size games that you based off of at Auburn. You really want to see, this has got to be the year of Ashton Daniels. I
Yeah.
mean,
Gonna have to be.
yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be. Um, Another guy I want to talk about is Daryl Desir. That's a guy
Hmm.
that a lot of people have as their breakout guys, and he
Uh-huh.
he did not have a very, I'm not gonna say successful, but he just was not really talked about last year. It was more of his brother Mandrill getting a lot of the media attention. But this is a guy that I think this year, I think he kind of year two steps it up a little bit. A guy that they went out and paid a little bit more for. So you're
Hmm.
hoping you get your money's worth in a guy like Daryl and Mandrill this year. Also a guy like Kevin Wynn, because they also went and got him from the
Hmm.
portal.
Yep.
And then I want to talk about, let's talk about J Rock. I'm gonna switch it up.
Yeah.
I think I think he's gonna be your solid. He's gonna be your wideout three with Javen Boggs. He's gonna kind of alternate.
Hmm. Oh, don't talk
And
about depth charts. Don't do that. That's against the rules.
New Mexico State's gonna be watching this.
I know. Yeah, they're spying on us. I can't tell you what's going to happen, but Norvell doesn't like that too much. So let's keep it down a little bit. Let's keep it down.
But yeah, I think he's going to be a probably your biggest rookie impact guy that
Yeah.
I think you're going to have. Obviously, you want to see a Devin Carter come back,
Hmm.
really healthy, and maybe he has a
Yeah.
bigger impact too.
Yep.
But this is probably going to be your guy. He's got a lot of hype around him in the preseason.
Yep.
We both know how that goes. Like you
Yep.
said earlier, it's easy
Uh,
to do stuff in preseason,
yep.
but once those lights start shining on you, what are you going to do?
I agree, man. And then you also didn't mention too that he's going to be your punt returner along with Jaden Boggs. Jaden Boggs will be your backup. I know he had to put Jaden Boggs as like a name out there for him, but like even though I know he doesn't like depth charts, like or Jason Lopez has been kind of being the one that's been taking the punt return duties. And I was there in Raleigh. I drove 12 hours just to watch that team crumble and crash and burn in special teams twice. We had many opportunities to win that game, and you need to have that in special teams. And Mike Norvell talked about it in his introductory press conference. Special teams is one of the most important factors in building a program. Unfortunately, other than those couple of years with Ryan Fitzgerald, you haven't had much. Yeah, you had the Trey Benson punt return or kickoff return. You had the Deuce Spawn or Deuce Span. You know how it is with that kickoff return as well. And like with the punt return, when's been your last punt return? DJ Matthews. I mean, it's been a while. I know Keon Coleman had a really close one against Miami a couple years ago. But I mean, like overall, like you need to see more from those guys. And with Daryl Desir, as you talked about before, he had 23 tackles, a sack and a half. And really, if you really look at stats between him and Mandrell, Mandrell in the last 6 games had 5 sacks. So like 5 of his 6 sacks come in the last 6 games of the year. So like he come on late, and his brother was still kind of learning and developing. But let's not kind of lose sight of this too, because you got to think Daryl Desir is 6'5", 259 pounds. I mean, this is not a small kid. This is not. We're not talking about somebody that's 220. This is a guy that's built and ready to play football. You look at both of those guys side by side, and they are grown men as true sophomores. So I just think there's going to be a lot of impactful things going on. I know Nick Williams and Terrence Knight, and they're just licking their chops, waiting for just being able to work with these guys and continue to work with these guys because they have been the leaders on this team. They're not quiet. They will tell you, like, go back and do it again. Like, that's a lazy rep. And you need guys like that. And most of these people, in today's society and everything, they don't take to hard coaching. But some of these guys do. We talked about with Nick Williams, talked about how they take it to hard coaching with Rylan Kennedy and Anderson as well. Both of those guys are playing at the jack position where you need it. Florida State needs that production. And I think on the defensive line, when you only had 18 sacks last year in 12 games as the defensive line, that's not good. Florida State needs to have more production, and Daryl Desir and Mandrell Desir are the two main guys. You might have paid $3 million for both of them to come back to Florida State. Like that $3 million has got to be spent well. You've got to see that come to fruition. And I mean, there's only one way you can do that. You've got to have that production.
Absolutely. I think Terrence Knighton actually just went to the media as well, and he was
Hmm.
telling everybody that the twins, man, they are hard on each other. They
Yeah.
they hold each
Yeah.
other accountable, and you've seen it with Mandrell Desir. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously you've seen the video by now,
Hmm.
um,
Yep.
of him telling everybody, "Hey, if you're not going to do this right, go to the other line." You
Yeah.
know, and that's why I think he's going to have a really good year, is because if he can already be that vocal leader and hold people accountable, I
Yeah.
mean that
Hmm.
really helps the defensive line.
1000%. I want to kind of address something too with you. So, Deuce Robinson, he's been a very vocal leader for this team. He's a guy that everybody trusts. He come back for his senior season after having 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's wanting to see more touchdowns go up, maybe a little bit more receptions as well at 56. But that's a pretty good number for him. I think that there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to really do well for Deuce Robinson. But he made a good point. He was talking about, some of the freshmen, and he brought up Justin Crutchfield again. I mean, Crutchfield has been a guy that was a low 4 star out of Vero Beach. We didn't really think he was going to be making much of an impact. There's a lot of DBs that they're looking at. But dude, he just keeps making headlines time and time and time again. And you're just like, man, and I get it. You got to see it before you believe it. I get you gotta do the right things, and you got to see him actually put it on the field. But dude, this is really kind of refreshing to hear. I get Deuce Robinson had the whole thing last year with Javon Boggs being an NFL receiver and being a breakout player, and he ended up just not really doing too much last year. I think he had like 9 receptions for like 84 yards and a touchdown. Not really too much to write home about, but like that's pretty impressive praise to have Crutchfield being a guy that he's talking about. And I really think that that could be a factor that Florida State can really lean their hat on.
Yeah, again, another guy that Florida State lured away from an SEC school, and
Uh-huh.
he was committed to Kentucky at one
Yeah.
point.
Uh-huh.
Ended up flipping pretty late in the cycle. Actually, same
Yeah.
day Amari Thomas flipped
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
And this was a guy that me and you have talked about
Mm-hmm.
many times. I kind of thought he would be a little bit more in the fold this year than what
Yeah.
I think you were thinking.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, I still think you can see him. I mean,
Yeah.
you do play a New Mexico State, and you do
Yeah.
play a Central Arkansas.
Yeah.
Those are two good games to get some freshmen some playing time. I think he's a really good guy. I mean, obviously
I do too.
we've all heard the hype around Charles Lester,
Mm-hmm.
another guy we need to step up. But I think if he remains healthy, he could be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see because I think Crutchfield can be a guy that you can kind of lean towards. And he's been around for a little bit now. He's seen what Florida State's been able to do, over the spring and then into the fall and then into the summer and then now going into fall camp. I thought that there was a lot of things that Florida State can kind of hang their hat on. And I get Florida State's never really had a problem with recruiting defensive backs because defensive backs should be able to gravitate towards Florida State. But I think, there comes a point where, okay, you have all these defensive backs. You're utilizing all these defensive backs in your defensive scheme, but are you able to play your guys? Are you able to just trust on veterans? I get it. Quindarius Jones is going to be a factor. Jabril Ross is going to be a factor. Ashton Barker is going to be another factor. KJ Kirkland. There's going to be guys there, but it's like, okay, do you need to have somebody step up like a Charles Lester, a Chauncey Cannon, who you just got this past recruiting cycle? There's going to be guys that you're going to have to rely on, and I just wonder if they're going to actually trust their guys and being able to do that instead of sticking out the same rotation time and time again. And, I think too, it also gives a testament to if they're guarding these wide receivers as much as they are, and I know we've talked about the wide receivers before, but having a guy like, for example, Makai Danzey, he's a speedster. He's always been built on speed. And if you're able to basically be impressed by this defensive backfield and holding some of these guys down, like a Deuce Robinson and a Makai Danzey and even a Jason Lopez and other guys like that, that is really impressive for this team. And I think they could really go far with their defensive backfield.
Absolutely. You were just talking about how you want to see, some of these other guys. I think you're going to have to. I mean, if not, you're going to see
Yeah.
these guys go to the portal. And that's the last thing anybody wants to see, especially after this offseason when you have 30 plus, I think,
Yeah.
people enter their name. I mean, that's just absurd. And you talk about a guy like Jabril Rawls and you
Hmm.
talk about a guy like Quinn Jones and you talk about some of the other guys. What about Nehemiah Chandler? That's
Yep.
another guy that you've heard a lot about. He's from South Alabama, North
South
Alabama,
Alabama. Yeah, yeah.
and but how's he going to play on this level? He's from the Sun Belt Conference.
Yeah.
I mean, is he going to be a guy that you can
Yeah.
really, really, really lean on?
Yeah, that's a factor you got to think about too, and I know we always talk about the offense and the defense, and I get it. They're important pieces of this team, but as I talked about before, special teams always a big factor in what Florida State brings to the table. You had a Jake Weinberg last year who was very inconsistent. He's now over at Miami. He can kick the crap out of the ball. He can be able to kick off really well, and they talk about him being one of the best kickoff specialists in the nation, which we all saw, but his accuracy was something that could be left desired. He can be able to kick a 60-yard field goal inside the practice facility, inside Doak Campbell Stadium when the lights aren't on. But when the lights were on, it just didn't happen. He missed over 8 field goals last year. And your punting game wasn't the greatest in the world. You had things that you needed to work on there. But there were things that you could have put your hat on, but it's like you don't have a Ryan Fitzgerald there anymore. You don't have a Mastromano, and you want to see more things there. And we talked about it before with Jason Lopez with the punt return game. I think the biggest factor that I'm looking at now in special teams is your kicker, Gabe Panikowski. And I get it. He didn't even kick last year. He wasn't even, he was basically at a JUCO, but didn't even kick. And then on top of it too, like in 2024, he kicked a couple of times, but I mean, it's like okay, didn't play very much, and then Daniel Hughes was somebody that was really good for New Mexico last year. But you want to see a lot of those guys, and I know it's not the most glamorous thing. You don't want to just be sitting there punting the whole game, but if you're able to set the tone, you're able to kind of set the offense back or set the offense back to let the defense kind of have its way. That's a great thing. You want to flip field position. And I think too, when you look at it, is it gives you more opportunities to have better punt returns. Maybe it gives you more explosive returns, and that way it sets up your offense with Ashton Daniels and Deuce Robinson and guys like that. I just think there's a lot of things that you can do. And, when you have pivotal games, you're on the road. Let's just say, for example, you're playing against Louisville on a Friday night and you need a field goal, maybe late in the third quarter to go up by three, you know, when it's 17-17 or something like that. You need Gabe Panikowski to kick a field goal, maybe from 39 or 40 yards. You need him to be successful in that. And, the special teams coach, he had talked about it before that, anywhere between like 40 and 55, he feels pretty confident in him. But like, obviously, kickers can kick all over the place. They can kick over 60 yarders if they really wanted to. I just think that you need to get in that consistent basis where you're able to kick a 45 yarder consistently. I think that's where you need to be financially, as a kicking situation there, you need to be able to kind of rely on your kicker between that 45 range. At about the 28-yard line, I think it'd be really good for this team to, get where they need to get to. Now, obviously, you want to finish in the red zone. You want to be able to finish, not just be a 20 and 20 team, in terms of, being good between the 20s. But I just think you need to kind of finish drives, and that's not something they did last year, which resulted in a lot of missed field goals.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about. I think me and you were talking about this as well. Is if
Mhm.
if you can't get that stop on defense,
Yeah,
you still want to flip field position.
yeah,
Um, and you talk about the inconsistencies of Jake Weinberg.
yeah,
You want a guy that, I mean, if it's 30 yards out, I mean,
yeah.
you want a guy that can nail that and get you those 3 points, especially if you're in a late, in a time crunch and you're just trying to top the game up, it puts you in a better position than, ultimately missing it. And
1000%, man. I think there's a lot of different things that special teams has got to get better at. Obviously, Florida State's got a laundry list of things they have to do and improve to get better. Obviously, when you win 7 games in 2 years, fan base is going to get very just lackadaisical and just they're not really excited about this whole season. They just want it to figure out if Norvell is going to get fired or they're going to get better. I mean, I'm not in the business of sitting there wanting my team to be awful. I want them to be good. I want them to be great, actually. I don't want them to be struggling. And just because my name has Norvell in it doesn't mean that I want Florida State to be this great kind of thing. I don't want to praise a coach. I praise the team because I'm here. I've been a season ticket holder for a long time. I want to see Florida State be successful. And I get so frustrated because this team knows that they can finish. They know they can get through the finish line, but they haven't been able to do it. That's the most frustrating part is like when you're up, at Virginia and you drop a pick six that could have made it 28-14 and you could have put that game away, but instead you keep them around to a point where they go to double overtime and they beat you. That's something you have to live with. And I just hate that factor of Florida State not being able to respond as much as I hear response till I want to throw up. At some point you have to respond. You have to finish. And I hope that's what they do, not necessarily in New Mexico State, but just this year alone.
absolutely.
But yeah, man, I appreciate all the love and support on the YouTube videos. As always, my guy Nole Nation's been with me all preseason as we've gone through some of the Florida State stuff. He's definitely going to be on a lot more videos and everything. Be sure to go follow his Instagram account over there. I'll leave that in the description. But like I said before, please subscribe to the channel. We are getting a lot more subscribers as we're going through this season. It's going to be a great year. I think Florida State's going to have a very spectacular season. And even if not, let's enjoy the misery together. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment your thoughts on all things Florida State because I know we're going to be having a blast this year. In Lot 19, I'll be at. I think it's going to be a great year, especially in that parking garage. I know everyone's going to be excited for the Florida State football game. Thankfully, there's no Tallahassee sun. Let's be thankful for that. Enjoy, everybody, your Wednesday night, and I will see you next time. And as always, go Noles.
No, no.